do you create a killer main character, a killer protagonist, one that is spanking, danking, diddly danking, wonderful? Oh, this is the video for you. Here are the 5 tips about how to create the best possible protagonist that it is possible for ever you to create. But if you love stories and storytelling tips, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell and I'll keep you updated with future videos. But here is the first tip. The first tip is to choose between one of the 2 main characters that you can really create. And I talk about this in more detail in my video about how to create a great character, just a character in general. But it also applies to a protagonist because there are really 2 types of characters. There are the characters that have a low skill level and a high likability. For example, Bilbo Baggins or Sid the Sloth. Or Wally, all of the characters like that, or characters that have a high skill level and a low likability. Characters like James Bond or Batman or Jack Reacher, they're a bit more dead, but they have a high skill level in a certain area, usually in fighting. And so the first choice is to choose which type of character you want your main character to be, because the thing that makes characters interesting, I believe, is the contrast between likability and skill level. And so if you choose which one is the best for you, then you're winning your way to creating a great character. And a character may start out with a low skill level, for example Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker, but then they grow throughout the story, and that's also fine because they start with a low skill level and then they grow, and that is part of the growth character arc, which leads me on to point number 2 nicely because it's related. This is to make the characters change, usually in a positive way. If you think about it, you are probably very different 1 year ago to what you are now. Even though it's a very short time period, only of 1 year, you probably changed quite a lot. I was very different last year. I'll probably look at this video a year from now and think I'm really weird, like what was I thinking? And you would probably look back at films of you a year ago and you'd probably think, what was that guy? Well, what was that girl? In the short space of a year, you've probably changed a lot. And if you put your protagonist in a foreign environment, then they'll probably change even more. For example, Bilbo Baggins going on his journey through Middle-earth. And think about the lies that the character believes. For example, that they're not good enough. Bilbo thinks that he's not really good enough to go on this journey and he could never be a burglar. But then when he's put in the right situation, he finds out that really he is good enough and he is confident enough because he has all the skills and he just needs to be put in the right situation for them to come out. And so you got it. Basically, if you put your characters in the perfect situation, then they discover the truth about themselves, that they're not that they're not that bad. The third tip is to make your protagonist someone who acts on the story, someone who's active. Someone who's active and actively influences the story and really changes things in the story. Not someone who sits back and is passive and lets everything else happen around him. It's a good idea to put your protagonist in situations where they're either forced to act or they choose out of their own will to act because they are heroes. Yeah, they're heroes. Your protagonist could be a hero, and you can form that hero out of the dust and put him in the situation where they choose to do the right thing. When you put a protagonist in a situation where they can rise up and seize the day and save the princess, or the princess could save the prince. Ah, yeah, exactly. Flippin' heck. Ho ho ho! Ho ho ho! Yeah. Fourth tip is to give them a strong want and a strong need. Basically, a want is the character's goal, the thing that they're trying to achieve in the story. In Lord of the Rings, Frodo's want is to cast the ring into the fires of Mount Doom. That is his goal and his ultimate aim for the story. But he also has something that I believe is more important but more subtle as well. And his need is Sam. He actually cannot reach his goal without Sam. And he doesn't really realize that until the very end of the story. And the whole story is about him trying to realize his need. And there are multiple points throughout Lord of the Rings where Frodo believes that he can do everything on his own, that he can get to Mordor on his own and that he doesn't need Sam. He actually rejects Sam, but then Sam comes back and Frodo is able to forgive him, and then he realizes his ultimate need for Sam. And so give them a clear want and a clear need, something that is hidden, a need that is hidden from them that they don't really know about, but they find out later on. The fifth tip is to let the reader know the character's thoughts. This may seem a bit obvious, but actually it's a very powerful way of adding another layer of immersion to your story. In Mistborn, Brandon Sanderson writes all of his thoughts in italics, so when you're reading italics, you know that you're reading the character's thoughts. And as I said, it adds another layer of immersion because you are usually the only one who knows your own thoughts, right? I mean, It'd be weird if you knew someone else's thoughts. And so now you can suddenly read someone else's thoughts and it's like, whoa, you're suddenly unsteady. And in the story, you're able to read the characters' passions and motives and desires, their carnal desires through their thoughts. And you're not usually able to do that in real life. And so it makes it really entertaining. Probably best that I don't know your thoughts and you don't know my thoughts, because it would just get messy. But it's fun to read other characters' thoughts in books, and it's a way of escaping to another world because you can read other people's thoughts, which you can't usually do in real life. And you're almost tricked into believing that you are the characters when you read their thoughts because it's so immersive. The First Law by Joe Abercrombie is an incredible example of this. He's able to express the characters' thoughts so well, and the thoughts often jar with the actual actions of the characters. So they'll be thinking one thing, but their actual actions will be completely different because it would be completely socially unacceptable if they acted on their thoughts. And so I believe this is one of the most entertaining parts of the reading experience, when you read characters' thoughts and you realize that their thoughts are completely wild and unacceptable to act out. So here's a quick summary of the 5 tips about how to write a great protagonist. The first one is to choose between the 2 main types of characters, either one who has a low skill level and high likability, or a low likability and a high skill level. The second tip is to make them change, usually in a positive way, where they replace the lies they believe about themselves with the truth through the situation that they're in. The third tip is to make your protagonist someone who acts on the story, someone who is active and doesn't sit in the background just as a passive spectator, but is someone who really affects everything and changes the story. And the fourth tip is to give them a strong want and a need, where the character has a very clear goal, but they also have a need that they need to discover. And the fifth tip is to let the readers know the character's thoughts, because this can make it much more immersive. So those are my 5 tips. If you enjoyed, give it a like and comment who is your favourite main protagonist, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.